Welcome back to the Weather Center, ladies and gentlemen. Happy February 1st, 2024. We are officially into the second month, the second chapter of the year 2024. And I want everyone to hold the phone before we get into the weather material. I wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who has been wishing me a happy early birthday. Today is officially the big day. We are now 30 years deep into this lifetime. Truthfully, I couldn't be more humbly proud to celebrate alongside you guys. And as such, tonight at 8 p.m., we are actually going to be going back to a bit of a tropics talk tonight. We will be discussing the potential for severe weather and some very dangerous conditions likely to set up along the West Coast, particularly for our California folks out there. But we also want to take the time to look at our February Climo data and continue to speculate and theorize what this hurricane season could look like. Thank you very much for joining me today, guys, and thank you for joining me for my birthday as well. Before we get started, please like and share this video and subscribe to the channel. Click that notification bell so you do not miss upcoming updates, because as you can see, we are back in business. We have a wonderful rhythm going here, guys, and this content is not going to stop, and we're going to keep going for the full calendar year of 2024. Now that we've got the incidentals out of the way, folks, fasten your seatbelts and let's get right in here. As usual, we're going to kick things off with our water vapor satellite shot here of North America. And as you can see, not only do we have a very robust pattern across the south, but a very aggressive setup with a sharp amplitude ridge continuing to extend further and further into the Canadian territories, with the northernmost apex actually just off the satellite view here, and another deep occluded low just off the coastline pressing in towards British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest, really hammering California and Oregon with lots of rainfall, very heavy mountain snowfall through the Intermountain West, the Great Basin, pushing into the Four Corners, and this is likely to continue at least for the next 3 to 5 days. Out east, we have an upper-level perturbation that's sinking in through Ontario, Quebec, trying to bring a little bit of colder air to the northeast, the Great Lakes, the Midwestern region. And down across the southeast, we're actually starting off with very pleasant conditions this morning. It's rather chilly outside. Our subtropical jet is still in full effect thanks to El Nino that has yet to finish up for the winter season. We are still expecting it to dissipate, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight during the live stream. But all in all, folks, we have some good dry air down here, particularly across Alabama, Georgia, the South Carolina, North Carolina area, and the Florida Peninsula, with maybe just a little bit of high cloud trying to work its way in off the west coast of Florida thanks to our subtropical jet. So before we go any further, I'm actually very excited because Weather Models has been one of my favorite websites to utilize in terms of all the model data I present to you guys, not only during these hard segments, but during my live streams. And I'm pumped to see that as of today, we actually have our NOAA blend of models to use as a tool on the website. To give you an idea, basically the National Weather Service and NOAA have come together and they've come up with a conglomeration or a group of ensemble models for the United States and other localized mesoscale and microscale regions of the lower 48, which is excellent. It adds to our ensemble arsenal, if you will, and just gives us an even better look at what sort of atmospheric parameters and weather phenomena we could be facing for different parts of the country. So we're going to get started with our look at the total snowfall. So as we take this through time, you can see the Sierra Nevadas are already well into the several feet of snow. We're actually already looking at the highest terrain features out there, pushing that 36 to 40 inch threshold, which is 3, almost upwards of 4 feet of snow. Again, you know, mountain terrain snow. We're not looking at anything in the low levels where we can really impact them. For the few folks out there who do live in the mountains, you're probably getting hammered by snowbout after snowbout. But as we continue through time, you can see this snowfall is going to increase across almost every periphery, every corner, every crevice, every canyon of the Rocky Mountains, all the way up to the Great Basin, the Intermountain West of Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, through the Front Range of Colorado. That is a guarantee. I used to forecast for lots of heavy snow events out there. And you can also see the Mogollon Rim of Arizona is going to get quite the dusting, and I do anticipate Flagstaff is definitely going to have a lot of snowfall occurring in their local area as well. I've actually been up there a few times during my time stationed in southern Arizona. We saw lots of snowfall, believe it or not, as late as May. A long time ago. I think this was back in 2015 or 2016, so it's not out of the question that we are going to see very, very heavy snow conditions for my NAU folks up there. If we go a little bit further in time, we'll go ahead and kind of talk about the elephant in the room. If you guys are noticing something over the Carolinas, Virginia, the Appalachian region, the NOAA blend of models has zero confidence we're really going to get any snowfall out there, even for the higher terrain features we discussed a few videos ago. Next up, we're going to use our NOAA blend of models to look at our total precip because I'm very concerned for the conditions we could be unfolding in the Southern California area near the Sierra Nevadas as well that could produce landslides, mudslides, and very hazardous conditions not only for travel travelers, but anyone who does live at the summit or the bases of these mountains. As you take this through time, pay close attention to what goes on out there over California. You can see that the Sierra Nevadas and the extreme westernmost coastlines of central and southern California near to the greater LA, San Diego area are expecting very, very heavy rainfall. We are looking at several inches of total accumulation, and this is a fairly reliable model. I actually lean in on models like the SHREF, the Short Range Ensemble Forecast, this National Weather Service NOAA blend of models, because we have several different computer models thinking and working together to come up with a very reliable, or I shouldn't say very, but at least a reasonably realistic total in terms of our snowfall, our rain, our ice, etc. And as we continue through time, not only are we going to see a second wave, a second very, very heavy swath of rainfall out there. Look at California just being inundated out there, especially as you get closer to the Bakersfield, Los Angeles area. We're already getting up into the 7-8 inch total in terms of our total rainfall. This is only 120 hours out. This is as of 6 February. We're looking at lots of rainfall out there, so you folks need to be making your preparations. It goes without saying we're going to have very rough seas, very high swells, very good beach erosion as well, like we would typically see here on the East Coast with these approaching low-pressure tropical cyclones during the summertime. One bit of good news is if you look down over the southeast United States, particularly from Texas all the way through to the Carolinas and especially the Florida Peninsula, for our folks who recently did battle with lots of heavy rainfall and flooding conditions to include flash flood conditions that occurred last week, it looks like all across the board, not only our NOAA blended models, but the SHREF, the Euro, the GFS, all the model data you want to look at, they've really backed off in terms of our total rain totals with this next bowling ball low pressure system, this upper low that's going to cut off from the polar front jet out west and move across the deep south. We've seen real dramatic decreases in our rainfall in terms of going from 4 to 5 inches all the way down to maybe an inch, half an inch to some areas, and maybe with the maximum expected amount being maybe close to 2 inches at this point. So we've really seen that value come down, and that's excellent news, especially for folks who may still be waiting for those waters to recede thanks to the events of last week. I'm not even going to move the chart from this timestamp. This is pretty much as we start the clock here. This is 6Z this morning, February 1st, and this is exactly why we have the setup that we do for California and the Pacific Northwest. You can see that very robust jet max of upwards of 140, 150 knots working its way towards the Southern California coast, towards Baja California and the desert Southwest before we see that split jet flow moving up parallel to the western coastline into our sharp blocking ridge that is still nestled in across the Canadian territories over the eastern half of the Rocky Mountains and spreading into the Great Plains. And if you come on over to our Euro mean sea level pressure and preset model, you can see as a result of that jet stream, we have a very, very deep occluded system, as I mentioned on the water vapor satellite shot off the coast of British Columbia, Washington State, that is just continuing to spin. If you imagine that counterclockwise rotation, it is just continuing to draw Pacific moisture out there. Any moisture that thing can grab hold of, it's just driving it into the west coast, keeping that training rainfall and shower activity in place for such an extended period of time. There's lots of widespread flooding that I've heard going on in Washington State through Oregon, and I would imagine we're going to continue to see these floods escalate as you go further and further south along the Pacific coastline. Our first system, numero uno, is already working its way, and you can see that 999 millibar low stamped over the Sierra Nevadas right around where the Reno Tahoe area is. It is going to continue to work through the Rockies, and that is where it is expected to split in half, with some of the remnant energy moving to the north towards Canada through Idaho, Montana, into Alberta, Manitoba area, and then the rest of it is going to bowling ball, as I've mentioned previously, through the south and try to redevelop into some sort of a surface-based feature as it interacts with a subtropical jet. That's another reason why we're really not going to see a heck of a lot of severe weather with it. We don't have those polar versus subtropical characteristics, taking a very cold air mass and punching it straight into a warm air mass. That's not the case here. We could still see some good lightning, some thunder strikes out of this, but we aren't going to see a hellacious bout of severe weather across the spectrum like we have with those previous bona fide winter storms. As the second one moves in, you can see it is actually expecting to intensify much quicker because of that strong jet max that's supporting it. We do have some very strong jet energy and shortwave activity helping to support this first low pressure that's moving through as we speak, but this next one is going to pack just a bit more of a punch, and you can see even the Euro is dropping it well below 1,000 millibars with lots of coastal heavy rainfall for California, very quickly transitioning to very heavy snow over the Sierras and then some lee of the mountain snowfall as well, despite the potential lee side warming we could have going on. We could have mixed wintry precip in some isolated areas through Nevada, trying to get down towards the Creech Air Force Base area, but lots and lots of snowfall really ramping up over the mountains, specifically Northern California and into that Reno area of Nevada. Going to quickly take you through the GFS. The GFS is right in line with what the Euro is thinking. We have that first one smacking through, and then the second one's going to come through, bringing a lot more heavy rain and snowfall activity. And as you can see, if I continue the loop and just continue to drag this out, it doesn't seem like we're going to have any kind of relief from this atmospheric river Pineapple Express setup until we get maybe into the 10th, if not the 11th of February. So my California viewers, if there are any of you out there, hunker down, stay safe. Just be very cognizant and maintain your situational awareness as we ride this out. The pattern will change. As I mentioned, if you haven't watched my video from yesterday, the pattern will let up. It has to flush itself out one way or another, but the main reason we have this training effect of storm after storm after storm, again, if you watched the video from yesterday, we have a huge traffic jam over central and northern CONUS, and that's preventing these systems from taking any kind of other path of escape, and unfortunately, they're being driven right into your local area. Okay, we're going to try to blast through the latter half of this segment, guys. We're going to go ahead and address again that elephant in the room in terms of that cold core, that cutoff low that's expected to create a Rex block-like pattern over interior CONUS, over the lower 48. And as you can see, Storm Prediction Center is in line with the general thinking we've been discussing here in the Weather Center. It does look like our greatest potential at best. And I mean, this is a marginal potential. I'm glad that they're also highlighting it with that level 1 risk for severe weather. We could see some very, very localized, very isolated instances of rotating storms, supercellular-like storms, maybe a few multi-cell storms out there, very pulse-like, that blow up and then dissipate within minutes of formation, just because we're looking at, again, a high shear but low buoyancy setup, and it looks like a large majority of our Cape is going to be over central and eastern Texas, so if we do get any severe weather reports, it's probably going to come out of that area, maybe as this system continues to transition off to the east. If I click to day 3, you can see Storm Prediction Center is right in line with what we're thinking here as well. We could see a little bit of Gulf of Mexico enhancement and some coastal severe weather. Lots of good lightning cracks out there for coastal Louisiana, getting into Mississippi, and then from there it does look like, because we are sitting in a dry, cool air mass down here through Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, the threat for severe dwindles. Switching on over to our Cape control model with the GFS, you can see as of Friday night at 7 p.m., most of our surface buoyancy is going to be located in Texas as that low pressure begins to unveil itself over the southern plains. And thereafter, as you move through time and that cold core low continues to interact and sweep across the south, we already have a colder polar air mass in place. We're waking up in the 30s and the 40s down here in the southeast, and a lot of the general thinking for our models is it's going to remain that way despite a little bit of warm air that tries to lift up in front of this system as it comes through, getting wrapped in that cyclonic spinning around the center of circulation. So usually, if you haven't watched any of my previous videos and you're just joining us now, I'll give you the cliff notes of why typically these cutoff lows give us a lot of chaotic weather, because as the name implies, you're breaking a piece of polar energy from the polar front jet, hence the name polar. It's going to be very cold in the upper levels of the environment, and usually when these systems break away from the jet, they're moving into a southern area where you have those equatorial, tropical, if not subtropical conditions, very warm surface temps, and as such, it begins a lot of turbulent mixing. That cold air at 500 millibars wants to rush down to the surface and replace that warm air at the surface just because of that change in density. Cold air is denser than warm air, so you get that turbulent exchange happening at a very rapid fashion. So you get garden variety pop-off thunderstorms that occur in the vortex itself, not along the leading edge like we see with these baroclinic frontal systems. They happen all over the place inside these lows, and because we have the saving grace of an already modified polar air mass across much of the south, the southeast, and the mid-Atlantic, we just aren't going to get that kind of severe coverage. You switch on over to the Euro, and the Euro is in line with the GFS. You can see that surge of buoyancy through Texas, moving through eastern Texas as we get into the very early morning hours of Saturday, and then as that low continues to sweep eastward, we really don't see a whole lot of Cape elsewhere. We could see some severe activity, very localized, very low-end threat for severe activity if you live south of the I-4 corridor in central Florida. So from Polk, Osceola County, the further south you go, you might see a little bit more of those lightning strikes. You might hear a little bit more of that thunder. We could see some higher winds, some heavier bouts of rainfall and convection, but I still don't think we're going to have enough to provide us with that severe coverage we've seen in the past with previous systems. And to further reinforce this theory, if you look at the Euro lightning density chart here for 0Z. As I take this through time, Texas does seem to receive the bulk of our lightning strikes, and even at that, it looks to be very isolated in nature, and then those strikes very quickly drop off until you get to the Florida Peninsula, where we could see a bit of a resurgence in those actual convective cells, those thunderstorms that are blossoming with a bit more of a robust updraft at its core, as opposed to this just shower and overall rainfall activity that we're looking at for much of the south. Here we're on the College of DuPage now. We're going to look at the NAM surface-based cape because we are close enough in time to see it. And there you have it. We have a little bit of that uncapped buoyancy occurring through Texas and parts of Oklahoma even, where we could see our more organized thunderstorms come together. And that rapidly transitions off the coastline of the United States, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico. And the model at the very back end here, we run out of the loop. But as of 6 Zulu, the NAM does think we could see that southern half of Florida try to uncap a little bit of that instability thanks to the warmer waters around the southern peninsula that could aid in a bit, just a little bit of that additional warm air advection to uncap and create that conditional instability from a conditionally stable atmosphere. As we switch over to our next chart here, I'm going to keep the timestamp where we are. This is 18Z on Sunday, this upcoming Sunday, February 4th. This is early afternoon, around 12 to 1 p.m. in the afternoon. What we're looking at here is called mass divergence, and for those of you who are very unfamiliar with that and we're using just technical jargon at this point, essentially mass overall, general perspective, looking at the big picture where your largest area of divergent flow or upper level splitting of the air that could help to produce stronger upward vertical motion in the low levels is occurring. And if you look at this chart, you can see we really don't have a lot of that mass divergence. We don't have a lot of diffluent flow that we would see with our jet streams, with these digging polar front jets supported by long or short wave troughs. We don't have a lot of those mechanics in the upper levels to help really kick off some very good, tall thunderstorms, cumulonimbus clouds to produce anything worth worrying about. And then last but not least, again, we're going to use a chart that a lot of you may not be familiar with. What this is our 6Z GFS mid-level lapse rates. So usually we digest and investigate lapse rates on those skew T soundings with the red and the green lines going vertically up through the atmosphere all the way up to the top of where we can observe weather, the troposphere. And in this case, we're looking at mid-level lapse rates because we don't have a lot going on in the low levels. We're going to be particularly cold. We have ample moisture, good enough moisture to produce some localized areas of half an inch to an inch of rainfall. Precipitable water and our humidity is kind of there despite this modifying air mass. So we're going to look to the mid-levels to see if we have that instability potential to create any organized thunderstorms that we need to watch out for in terms of advisories, special weather statements, or even severe thunderstorm warnings of producing damaging hail, localized funnel clouds, you know, the works. And in this case, as we quickly go through Saturday and into Sunday, as you can see, immediately as that cold core system moves away from the southern plains, a lot of those favorable mid-level lapse rates disappear because it moves into that dry, cool air over the southeast. And even for parts of Florida headed up towards the Carolinas, where we could see some very good return flow on the north side of this upper low, it's just not there. So all in all, guys, I really don't think we're going to have much of a severe risk. This is mainly just going to be a high wind and rain maker for a lot of us. And before we close out the video, I want to let you know that we are still looking at, as this system deepens, regardless of where you live, this gradient wind field is going to be fairly strong, 30 to 40 knot winds with gusts a little bit above that, because we do nonetheless have a deepening surface system. It's just not characterized, or I guess you could say structurally put together like some of these other previous winter storms that have dropped blizzards, snowfall, icing conditions to the north, and in severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, hail, high winds down to its south. We don't have the same type of conveyor belt setup. We don't have the textbook jet support from the north interacting with features down in the south. This is a totally different system, and that's why it's probably been a little difficult for other sources out there to properly forecast it, and that's okay. That's how we learn. But with that being said, we're closing out today's Weather Center segment. Thank you very much again, guys, for joining me on this lovely Thursday afternoon. Wherever you may be viewing from, I'm hoping I have a lot of people tuning in from the West Coast so we can get you better prepared and get a better handle on what's expected to unfold out there in California and up the West Coast of the United States and further into the Four Corners area. And as well as my folks down here in the South and the Southeast, I hope I've alleviated whatever tensions you may have been feeling in terms of flash flood conditions or any kind of severe weather potential for your local area. Once more, I echo the same sentiment sentiments as the beginning of this video. Thank you so much to those of you who have reached out, whether it be on my Instagram, my X, or my TikTok, to wish me an early happy birthday. And thank you to those of you who will be joining us tonight at 8 p.m. who echo those same sentiments as well. I can't tell you how much I appreciate every single one of you, and it may sound a bit cliche, but I'm very grateful for every single one of you who tune in and show support to the channel. I'm very excited to see what the rest of 2024 has in store for us, and I'm going to continue to work my butt off to provide you guys with the best weather content that I physically can for everybody out there who just wants to stay safe. Looking forward to seeing every single one of you tonight at 8 p.m. I hope you have the free time and the availability to join us as we talk tropics and talk severe weather. But until next time, guys, you know the catchphrase. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.